Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this thing called Table Browser. It is an Xcode OS X app. It's not an iOS app, if I have this correct. Yeah, Objective-C Table Browser. We're not going to build it because it's not as fun, but we'll just take a look at it, and you'll see kind of an example of an application that is, well, you see it, you're gonna like it, hopefully. So what we're looking at then is a main.m and the table controller. Let's just open up the project. We'll take a look at it. Hopefully, this is a very old project, so it'll work on older applications for you. What I want to do is kind of show you. Well, let me run it for you. I'll show you what this is actually doing. So I'm not going to see any. Oops, your Mac runs a version of OXS which is lower than the project's minimum development target. Lower? Okay. Yeah. Let's just take a look here. Oh, you know why? Because I have it set on 32. Let's see, wait a minute. Let's take a look at the target here. Latest 10.9. Where'd that come from? Tablet 10.8. You know, I recently upgraded my Xcode. Let me show you how I fixed that problem, actually, because I just did it real quick here. If you have a MacBook and you're able to run it, it's now running. The way I got that to run was because for some strange reason, the default on my Xcode was on 10.9, which is Mavericks. I'm on Mountain Lion still because I don't want to go to Mavericks, and I'm on 10.8. I can tell it by coming up here and going about this Mac. It says 10.8.5. It was set on 10.9, which is why that project wasn't working for me. So if you have that problem, what you want to do, and I haven't shown you this yet, but if you click on, if you're in the project here, you're in the files, and this is what we've been looking at. If you come all the way up to the top and click on this main view up here, you got build settings, info. This is where you're going to put the app icon. You're going to set capabilities for cloud storage, for services and stuff like that. You want to build settings. The base SDK is what I changed to make that work. You can also backgrade it. I can go back down further. It doesn't look like I can go any further than 10.8 on here though. No, it says iOS 7. I can't go back any further on the 10.8, but at least it does work. So when I run the program, I don't get a little simulator that comes up. Instead, I get an Apple application. So it's running on my OS X. And so you can see I have a menu bar at the top. It's part of the standard menuing system if you're familiar with Apples or not. And this is interesting because I've got it's a table view that's set for adjustment. And I have a web view over here. So this is actually live. There's an itu.edu website. It's going to load up any second now. Of course, there's a lot of graphics on it. And there we go. It actually does work. It's going to be giving. Oh, it does give me the mobile version of it. Look at that. I didn't even know we had a mobile version. It's the mobile version of our website. Because this is a Chrome mobile browser. And then here's my website. I don't have a mobile version. Just looks like the regular one. This isn't Google Mobile though, is it? Yes, it is Google Mobile. Look at that. But it's a Safari mobile browser that's in here. So it's a window. That's a window, and I'll show you the components of this in a few minutes. And then I just put a little list over here with some URLs. And when you click on the URL, the click event brings it over here. So let's take a look at the code to kind of see what that looks like. We're not going to worry about programming this sucker. And if you want to, you can actually, you know, kind of get a good feeling of how, if you're going to get into OS X application development, not quite as popular than, let's say, iOS development. Everyone wants to develop for iPads and for iPhones. Hardly anyone wants to do anything for the Mac. But with Mavericks, you can make applications that work on both. So they're really going towards the truly universal. So if you write a good app for a tablet, you can run it on your computer, yada yada, back and forth, with a newer version. So that's what one of the new features of Mavericks is, more compatibility with apps. So they're trying to grow that. So you might find yourself over here at the side of the tool set. And this is you know, that side I keep avoiding. I keep going into the iOS part of it. This is the OS X section right below it, or above it, depending upon how your menu is set up. But if we take a look at the code for it, I'm importing a WebKit, which is the web browser window, which is going to give us our web view. So in here you might notice I've got, and if I load up the XIB file for it, it's called main menu.xib. I've got this little screen over here. If I click on my little tuxedo icon over here and flip over to the .h file, look, very similar, huh? To the same look and feel that we had over at on the iOS side. But instead of there being a little iOS window, I've got two windows here. I got a table view and a web view component. Where did I get those? I just dragged them over here. So if I come into the library to here at the bottom, I've got a table view. I just took a table view, dragged it over, stuck it in here. Now I got two of them in here. Probably going to mess up my my running, but it's okay. If I wanted a label, I can come over here and put a label in here. Lo and behold, I got a label. Stuck a label on there. You can stick anything you want on there, actually. It's just like the apps we've been building so far. The only thing different is this is a window. So let me come back over to here. You can see, and I think I've shown you this already, this is an old project type. So we're seeing a little bit more detail here in the newer iOS 7. And if I were to put this up into a, you know, I had to downgrade the project type actually a little bit, but I would see a little bit less detail, but pretty much the same format, where I can get at each one of the components and I can move the components around. I have a split view, a scroll view, a clip view in here. Probably because, let me just actually undo some of the change hidden. Undo the add text field and undo the add scroll view that I put in here. So, you know, I'm back to my regular project. But lo and behold, the reason why I'm showing this to you is to show you that it's the same, to give you hopefully the impression that what you're programming in iOS is the same as an OS X application. The interface is the same, which is one of the beauties of using this platform to begin with. It's pretty universal. So we have two IB outlets that we did, and the NS object is in here. And inside the NS object, we have our, we're now, instead of inheriting from a view controller, we're inheriting from NS object. And in here we have a mutable array, a web view, and a table view. It's inside of the formatting is a little bit different, so I was fixing it for you so you can see it. And instead of making properties out of them, we just, this is an old project, by the way. So, but instead of making properties out of them, it was just wired directly. If we look at the .h implementation of it, we see just regular old Objective-C code like we saw before. In the mutable array of URLs, we're just adding, those are the 3 URLs I stuck in there. And if I were to modify this, I'd probably get the view did load kind of method and load one of them by default. Right now, none of them gets loaded. But if I click on them, I have an event where it loads up the URL, puts it in the web view that's on the right-hand side. Nice little web browser, actually. And what I recommend doing is actually just kind of, and this is it. This is just this controller. That's it. That's the entire app, actually, or program, I should say. It's just these 3 components, the array of URLs, the web view, and the table view that's holding the URLs in it. And the navigation is the controls that we get from the events. So the table view selection did change. It's kind of like when you change something in a text field or you change the slider, it's the same thing. So it's the event for the table view. Did the selection change? If it did, then load it up in the, then here's the URL, and the web view is going to be set the mainframe URL to this URL. So we can actually do the same. I have the same app actually, that's same program that's written for the OS X instead of, that's written for iOS instead of OS X. So. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out to you because that was kind of an interesting example. So the next one we're going to look at, we've already done file chooser. Let's take a look at this digital clock because it's a real easy one. And I don't know what we looked at before, so if it's a repeat, at least it's not boring. Maybe you won't find it boring. This one's called a digital clock, and it is right here, digital clock tutorial. There's the digital clock finished product. If you're interested in it, can't get it to work. You can do what we did in the last one, where you just bring up the finished product and you go, okay, what's wrong? What's different about this one versus this one? You can sort of troubleshoot it. All right, so this one is, again, all these tutorials are made prior to 7.0, so they all have ARC, automatic reference counting, in there, and that was features we had to turn on and off. Now it's just all on by default. We don't have to worry about turning them on and off. So that's the dead giveaway when I see people who create projects, and you know, you can take out the header information, you can change the dates and everything, and the name and everything, but you can't change the programming style when it's using memory manually, which is everything prior to about 6 point something. Then you know that the person didn't really write this, because who in the world would go through all that work to manually manage your memory when it's done for you automatically now? So even if you have a new project type and you're still working on it, you still can use automatic reference counting. It's really the old stuff that is all done with these retain and releases and all this other stuff. So long story short, it's really funny when I see people, oh yeah, I wrote it. Like, in what century? This project is like 5 years old because of I could tell by the programming style. Anyway, and so people go, well, what if I use somebody else's computer? That's fine. There's modern day programming and then there's old programming. So you can tell how people like discovered stuff and changed stuff throughout the years that kind of make it for a different kind of style. Anyway, it's like writing source code in any language. There's a programming style. So let's go ahead and just write something here. So let's go ahead and open up Xcode, create a new project. Enough talking, let's writing. This is what I'm talking about. If I came over here, that project that was just created was a Coca application. But we don't want to do that. I'm going to do iOS. So I'm going to go iOS application and single view application and click on next. And then this one's going to be, let's just do here, clock. We got a clock. And I'm going to do it for iPhone. I'm going to go ahead and click on next. And I'm going to click on create. Now, the guy in the back who's got an iPhone, if you do the iPad application, it's not going to run on your iPhone. So that's why I have an iPad, because I can run iPhone on iPad. It works out just fine. And if I put it on Universal, I get both. So I get both interfaces. It works out just fine. So a lot of people who do development will go into the iPads instead of the phones. The only problem with that is you don't see how small it looks on the itty-bitty little phone, because it's always going to be reformatted for your iPad. So long story short, you're going to end up investing in equipment. You're going to buy a phone, you're going to buy an iPad, and you already have the computer, I hope. So it's not cheap to do this kind of development work. Anyway. We have the main storyboard. Click on the main storyboard. That's probably where I'm going to start. Most of my tutorials start out with the UI. Alright. So this one we're going to add an NS timer. So we're going to keep track of time. We're going to put a timer on the app. So actually the timer component, long story short, isn't going to use a UI. We're going to connect it to the UI. But we're going to create the property. We're not going to create a property either. We're just going to create a variable NS timer. So I have the NS timer, my ticker, and my voice is going to go any minute because I probably shouldn't have stood in the back. I'm slightly allergic to cigarette smoke, and the guy who was fixing his computer was smoking, I can tell. But it's okay, it's getting better. I knew I shouldn't, it was my fault, I shouldn't have gone back there, or I shouldn't have stood there, but I'm slightly allergic to a component of it, so that's what's going on with me right now. It's okay. No need to feel guilty. Or responsible. I'm just kidding. It's alright, I can recover. Oh, okay. So if I'm snorting my nose and sneezing and coughing and acting irritating, it's too much cocaine. Alright, so I'm going back to my tutorial. It is getting better. It's just, you know, it's funny because it's a delayed reaction. I was back there a few minutes ago. I wasn't even back there recently. But it took this long for my system to realize it didn't like it. Which is absurd. It should have just not liked it initially. So It's because it has to get into the bloodstream and it has to get into the... It just took, you know, that's how slow my metabolism is, I guess. I was exposed to an element my body didn't like, and it took like, what, 15 minutes or so for my body to react to it. But luckily for you guys, I'm still able to teach. I know you're like, shucks. Okay. All right, let's write some code. That's what we're here for. Talk about all my ailments and sicknesses. Here we go. All right, so in the view controller.h file, let's go ahead and add our variable. So at the top of the code, I'm going to put in, you know, it's as funny as people still smoke. With all the advertisements and stuff out there. You're going to seriously consider quitting soon, aren't you? Doesn't mean I'm not going to help you. I knew what I was getting into. But seriously, this is the year 2013. Anyway, that's, you know, what they used to say is that secondhand smoke can kill you, right? So you might as well get it firsthand. It's healthier for you. The secondhand stuff's really bad for you, but the firsthand stuff is better for you. Technically, it actually is, but I'm not promoting cigarette smoking right now. But if I talk about it enough, anyway. All right, so I put a variable in here called NSTimer, and it's called myTimer, the data type. So this is like NSString and NSInteger and all of the other stuff, but it's NSTimer, another data type. So it's going to be responsible for updating the clock label, and the clock label is going to have our time on it. So I like this example because it's a digital clock, and it's just a label. And the timer is just going to show the label, and it's all Objective-C programming. So we're going to add a couple more methods to it, and it's going to be run timer and show activity. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste these guys over here. Oops, if I can get to my Xcode project. Here it is, hiding in the back there. And in the viewcontroller.h file, let me clean up the real estate a little bit here. So I put in my variable that I'm going to use to keep track of my timer, which is going to be called NSTimer. It's a data type NSTimer. And I'm going to have run timer and show activity. Because I'm going to run it, I'm going to show the results. So what I'm going to do now then is go to the viewcontroller.m file and synthesize the clock display. So, which I don't have here yet, so I have to put a clock display on there, which is going to be a label. So this is going to have us, let me see, just want to try and make sure I didn't skip any steps like I did last time. I did skip a step here. First, in step number 2, which I skipped, I needed to add a label to the, well, we don't have a viewcontroller.xib file, we have a storyboard now, so we're going to put it on that, and we're going to label it clock display, and then we're going to wire it as a property. So I'm going to click on my storyboard over here, and open up my side panel and take a label out and slip it on the UI. And this is really my clock display, so I'm going to make it kind of big. So I'm going to make the font about 20. I think I'll center it as well, and because that's where my digital clock's going to show up. And then maybe I'll make my background here green, because my background's always green. There we go. It's very good for the environment. There we go. It's green. All right, now it's not any much better for the environment. Okay, so we're going to call this one clock display. So let's go ahead and click on the tuxedo icon. You're going to go home and you're going to go, she says there's a tuxedo icon. Where is that? That's not in any of my books, this tuxedo icon. It just looks like a tuxedo. So it's really not the technical term. Control drag it over. Stick it if you're in the right file. This is the wrong file. This is good. It wouldn't let me add it. So here's another tip for you. I was in the wrong file. Well, when I clicked in and pressed the control button, it'll go here, but I don't want it here. But this is where I wanted to put it. But I'm looking at this guy. Well, that says implementation. This is precisely why I do this. Because then I don't have to worry about what file I'm in. I'm in the @implementation, which means I'm in the .m file. I don't want to be in that one. I want to be in this one here. So I'm going to wire it to the top because that's where I like to put it. And so I'm going to click on the label, control drag it, and then call it clock display. So now I have a UI label. It's called clock display. Go ahead and press OK. Now I can go over to the .m file and synthesize it. So in here, I'm going to say @synthesize, and I'm going to go clock display. So now I have a local property that's going to keep track of this label. So now I can go back and finish what I was doing before, which was right down here at step number 4 to synthesize it. I synthesized it. So now I'm going to have to add the implementation for the method that we just created called runTimer. And the runTimer method is going to start the timer, show the activity method every 0.5 seconds, so every half a second. So here's really the Objective-C part of it. Let's take a look here. My timer, which is an instance of NSTimer. NSTimer scheduler time with interval 0.5, which is the target that we're looking at. And then we have a colon with a selector, which is actually kind of interesting. The selector is show activity. So the selector is going to run this method for us every 0.5 seconds. Or 0.5 seconds. So the selector is a way of saying internally, it's kind of like self space show activity, but that's a method call. If we want to run it with the timer, we're going to say every 0.5 seconds, run show activity. What's show activity going to do? Take the current time, put it out on the label for us. So it's a digital clock that has a timer. We keep track of the time. Every so often, we just update the label. We're going to update the label every 0.5 seconds. So it's going to look like a digital clock. What it really is, it's a timer mechanism. It's an NSTimer. So user info nil, repeat. Yes, we're going to repeat this every 0.5 seconds. If we only did no on the repeats, it would only do it once. Like if we were going to set an alarm or something, it would do it once. So the method is going to run every 0.5 seconds by the timer created. And here's the method that's going to run. So the timer that we created here on the runTimer starts the timer, runs the method. So this is the runTimer method. In fact, I could just take this piece of code here. I'm going to copy it and stick it in. Oh, I have to actually do it the old way. I have to actually take these two methods and copy them over because I manually put them in here. So I'm going to create the method bodies, just the templates for it, and then I'll put the code inside of it. So I'm copying here from the .h file. I'm going to put them into the .m file. I'm going to stick them towards the top up here and just put in the fake method bodies right now, just with some opening and closing brackets. So I have something to work with. There we go. And then let me go back and put that code in there to start the timer. So runTimer code. That's the code I just talked about a few minutes ago. runTimer starts my timer. My runTimer every 0.5 seconds is going to run the selector show activity. What's show activity going to do? Let's just take a look. So show activity is going to take the default data type that we're working with, which is a time. It's going to format it into a string, show the string on the label. Nothing brand new. We've been doing this all day today. So NSDate formatter. So the object we're going to call formatter is going to be of the data type NSDate formatter because we want to format it to a date. Which is kind of interesting. This is what is a little bit different about Objective-C versus other languages. There's actually built-in data types for some of the odd stuff you wouldn't think about. So like in Java, there's a couple of date types. Not as much support though, in my opinion. So C++ has no support at all for date types, really. So NSDate, where do you get that? Or where do you get an NSTimer from either? So Objective-C as a language is pretty feature-rich in terms of built-in objects. So it's going to be today's date, which is really what today's time. Date and time is together in terms of the date. So you're thinking, well, isn't this a date? Is this a timer application or is this a date application? Well, it's a digital clock, but it's coming from date. because the date's keeping the current date and time. So it produces a time that looks like this here, running this method with set time style, colon, this is the parameter we're sending it. We're sending it the NS date format or medium style. You know, there's the long, the short, the medium. Depends on, do we want the AM, PM, do we want the hours and minutes and the seconds, do we want the date and the time? The long one is date and time. Medium is going to be just the time, hours, minutes, and seconds. The short's just going to be time, no hour, no, like maybe just the hours and minutes and seconds. It's just going to be abridged. So set the label with the updated time. This is our clock display label. We're going to set the text to, well, here we go, formatter string from date. So we can do string from integer, string from formatted string, which is what we did earlier, string from this string. So the key word is string from. So you get stuck and you go, well, I got a timer, what do I do? Oh, or I got this, Google string from iOS, and you'll see all the, no one's gonna, it's like C programming, no one's gonna memorize all of the different functions and routines. There's some you're gonna use more often than others. This one, the string from ... you're gonna use a lot, because you're gonna end up having to convert something to a string, because it's not gonna be a string, because everything on that UI is a string. So it's text. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste and stick this in here. This is the show. So the show activity is going to show my method in here. So now I got my clock display. And so now I actually should have a clock display, except for I have to start the timer. I haven't actually started any execution of anything. So the run timer method has only one line of code in it, split into multiple lines. All it does is show the activity method every 0.5 seconds. The activity method creates the label that we're going to put out there, creates the string for the label we're going to stick out there. So we want to call the run timer after the view loads, because we need to start it. So here's where we get this self concept back in here. Self space run timer. It's going to ourselves run this method. This is something you're going to use a lot as well. You'll just constantly use self space because you're going to start something. Otherwise, the screen's going to come up and you're going to have this little label sitting there. What's going to happen? So we're going to start off the run timer. It's going to run the other one. So I'm just going to copy this line of code over here, stick it in the view did load method. It doesn't matter if you stick it above or below the super view did load. Eventually, super view did load's going to load. Doesn't matter what order. In C, C++, if you put super, if it's not the first line, you get in trouble. Or this, there's an order on C++. Objective-C doesn't matter what order it all runs. So here I could take the label off, or I could just leave the label printed on here. It doesn't really matter. This one should essentially reset itself after 0.5, half of a second goes by as soon as the program runs. So let's go ahead and run it. We should have a clock, and then we're going to add stopwatch features to it. So let's see. So every 0.5, the label's being reset. Is it really 429? It is 429. Wow, it's getting close to the end. See how time flies when we do tutorials? 429, 430, 431, 432. It will almost be 6 o'clock very soon. Anyway, so we have a working clock, point demonstrated. So let's add some functionality to it. We're going to put a stop and a start on there. All we're really going to do, because the functionality is this show method, this show activity method, and it's all running on off the timer object. We're just going to update it. So if you want to make it run faster, you could just show it more often. Otherwise, 0.5 is pretty reasonable. You could show it like every minute if you wanted to. I hate those clocks. You look at them, and then you have to wait like a whole minute before something changes. Because it doesn't show the seconds. And you wonder, is it working? I don't know. I can't tell. It's like when you try to change the time on your computer. It's like, oh man, it was like really halfway through the minute, the next minute, and now it's off by a minute, so you can't get it to sync. Alright, so we're going to add 2 more buttons. There's going to be start clock and stop clock. So let's add a start and a stop button to our UI. Oh, let's see what we got going on here. There we go. Put in your button. So maybe this is the start of your assignment number 6. Start, stop. See, that's the part I don't like about iOS 7. And I just discovered this. I think it was the weekend. It was like the weekend this class started last time. We had that overnight update, and they went, "What is this?" Because the whole, now I'm kind of used to it at this point because I've been using it for a couple months, but I still don't like the way the buttons look. I like the old button look, but now you look at everything on the phone, it's just text. Just press the text and there's buttons. So those used to be buttons. You can still get the button effect back, but now I'm trying to conform, so I'll just leave it alone. So there's my start and stop button I put on here. So let's go ahead and wire some activities for this. So switch it over to the view controller.h file because we're going to put the method prototypes. I'm going to put the method prototypes above it here. So I'm going to right mouse click on start, and now you guys know why I use this external mouse, because this thing on the I don't like the whole touchpad thing. I know people will disagree with me. Once you get used to it, it's great, but I like the buttons. I'm still old-fashioned when it comes to the buttons. Anyway, so the touchdown event here, put it over here. This is going to be the start button. At least I know which button I'm pressing with a mouse. On the keypad, on the touchpad, I don't necessarily know exactly what I'm doing. Maybe I haven't spent enough time invested in that, but I changed the type to UI button. Now I have an IB action here versus IB outlet. The outlets are input, output. The action or like action button or action, action event. If you want to think of it that way. If you're more of a Java person, then it's more like an action. Action listeners. So this is stop button. Change the type to UI button. There we go. Now I got a start button and I got a stop button. Hopefully you guys can do this at this point. If not, a couple more of these exercises you'll be doing it. So let's see. My methods are down on the bottom. So now I'm just going to send a method to something to start and stop. And then I could possibly put, I think I'm supposed to actually put another label out here because we want to keep track of the time between the start and the stop. And then we can update another label with how much time has passed between the start and the stop, because it's not what we're supposed to be doing here, I guess. So let's see. I'm going to put another label here. Now I'm going to get myself in trouble again because I'm definitely working ahead. So let's see. I'll put this here on 20. There you go. Get a little bit bigger. Make the label bigger so that, make this one big enough? Yes, I did. Okay, good. And I'm going to center this guy as well. Alright, so I got my UI looking good. Let me go catch up on my notes here. So add a counter. We're going to put the counter in the label probably. So let's see what's going to go on here. So we're supposed to add a label called counter timer, and I didn't wire the label yet, so I'll go ahead and do that. So I got a start button, a stop button, and a label. It's going to be counter timer, counter time. So let's go back here. I'm going to flip it to the .h file. I'm going to stick it right below my other property. And the reason why I pull this out is because I like to look at it all on one line. There we go. And I'm going to control drag it. And this is going to be called counter timer. All right, let's just go put counter time. I like that better. I don't know what it was originally. So it's on a UI label. Looks pretty good. So now I need to add the counter time to my synchronize. So I'm going to go over to here, and I'm going to synchronize this up here. So I got clock display, comma, counter time. So I got my label on my top, my label on my bottom. You only have to synchronize, you only have to synthesize what's your property. So if it's not in the property list, because that's another question students usually ask is, how do you know what you have to synthesize? It works in a group, property synthesized together. These guys are methods. Instead, you have to fill in method bodies for these guys. So let's talk about those method bodies then. So we have that new property out there for the counter timer. So let's see what the methods are going to look like here. Oh, it was counter time. I finally used the same word. So we're going to add an integer counter. And it's going to be a new variable that's going to keep track of a counter for us. So let's just take a look here. And let me go back up again to my viewcontroller.h file. Integer counter. There's my counter. Got my counter in there. All right. So let's see. We synthesize these two. Did that already. So we're going to add the following code to the viewcontroller.m file. The interesting thing about this guy here is that this guy will be initialized to null, not nil, but null. This guy gets initialized to 0 for us automatically. So there's a lot of people that follow this school of thought where, you know, if I did that, and first my first thing it says in the view did load, maybe I should say that equals 0, or maybe I need to initialize that before I start using it, because if you program in C++ or Java or any other language, well, actually Java initializes automatically as well, but people don't know that. But if you're a C++ programmer, you're constantly saying integer counter equals 0, or you're doing counters equal to 0 somewhere. But you don't actually have to do that, is what I'm trying to say. Let's see what happens here. So we'll just leave it alone, just in the back of your mind. Think we never initialized that. So in the start button, we're going to start our counter. So my clicker, my NS timer, scheduled timer with interval is now 1. We're going to count seconds now instead of half seconds. We're going to do the show timer activity. Well, the show timer activity is this guy up here. Where's my show timer? Show activity. Well, we have a show timer activity. It's going to be a new method we're going to put in. Where did it go? We didn't put it in yet. It's down here. Here it is. I should just go a little bit down, a little bit further. We're going to say counter plus equals 1, assuming that it started out being 1. So we're actually starting in the start button. We're starting a different timer instance with my ticker that's going to start the time at the current time, increment it by 1 instead of 0.5, and call show timer activity instead of show activity. And show timer activity, this method down here, is after I found it, is going to update the counter time.text to be equal to, and then we're going to format the hours, minutes, and seconds, which are going to be integers, put it into a string, put the string out there on the label. So let's see. Our start button and our stop button is going to invalidate it. So invalidating my ticker, it doesn't make it nil. It doesn't make it null. It doesn't take it away. It doesn't garbage collect. It doesn't do anything at all. It just turns it off. So when you go and it looks for my ticker, it doesn't exist. It's stopped. It's not a valid component. So it doesn't remove it because you can always validate it again. Just because you invalidated it doesn't mean you can't validate it again. You could actually validate it. So it's kind of like an on and off button if you want to think about it. That doesn't do any garbage collection, it doesn't do anything with it at all. It just kind of stops it. You can invalidate any object you want, actually. It just makes it so you can't use it. So it's kind of a cheat sheet way of stopping it by invalidating it. So you took my ticker and said, okay, you're not here anymore. And then we go to a step further. We take my ticker and make it equal to nil. We do that, we garbage collected it. So we stopped it, and then we garbage collected it. Why do we do that? Because sometimes the nil, I don't know, we didn't even really even need to invalidate it. We could have just set it to nil, actually. But is the nil going to work? Sometimes it will actually trigger an error because it's a working object. Object is running. You're just going to stop an object and make it garbage collect it. So it's nice to put them in combination, to invalidate it, then make it nil. Make it nil, you're going to throw it away. Not going to work anymore after that. But we don't have to worry about that because we're going to set, every time we press the start button, we're going to set the my timer equals to a new timer. We're going to automatically initialize that to a new object instance. A new object instance is going to be set, and then this method is going to run. And this method down here It's just calculating out hours, minutes, and seconds, creating a string out of those integers, putting it together, formatting it like a string, and putting it out on the label. Everything that we've been doing so far this morning. So it's just a repeat of everything all over again with a little bit of math in there. Okay. What? To divide by 3,600. Take counter divided by 60 minus the hours times 60 hours, minutes, and seconds. So. Alright, so I'm going to put the code in. I don't know what I've done here actually. I haven't done anything. I'm going to slip over to the .m file. Put the code in for the start and stop button. That's a good start. Let's go. Here's the start button. It's really just one line of code, which is doing the same thing as our paste timer is doing. Now let's just do this here for a second. This is going to have a problem because it's yellow because we don't have this method in here yet. I haven't pasted the method in, it doesn't exist yet. But the line again is at the beginning of this line. And in fact, if I do that, it's going to tell me that show timer activity is not declared yet. Yes, I know. Alright, so I'm going to put the stop one in here, then I'll copy that other method in there. And again, it doesn't really matter what order you put stuff in. So let's go take and copy that method in there. Here it is. And that warning will go away. You know, I'm going to put the method in right here, actually. I'm going to put it in between so I can find it easily. And let's take a look here. We got some interesting cut and paste error here with some interesting spaces. Let's get rid of those spaces. And I don't know if I have a counter. Small counter?
Like, there is not the error, but like it will display what's the wrong actually.
Yeah. Oh, I see your suggestion here. It's I have counter time. I don't have counts. Use of undeclared identifier. Where's it say over there? Count or something. That's my problem with these messages. I know there's a way of making it bigger. Let's just do it this way. Fix it. Replace counter time. No. Okay, so we haven't initialized counter. I think I have counter. Where's counter coming from? Counter is coming from here. Counter. Let's take a look here. We can fix the problem. Integer counter. Well, let's just do it this way.
That is, in the show activity, we have closed semicolon. So, while show activity, the first line in the method.
In the method of show activity.
We have a semicolon over there. So,
for the bracket,
yeah.
show activity.
Oh, what do we have a semicolon there for? I don't know. Actually, that doesn't cause a problem, but that's good. Thank you. We're on the right track. Do I have a counter time.txt? I have a counter time, right? Oh, let's just see. Your seconds. It seriously does not like that line, does it? Let's just see this. Unused variable hours. Yeah, of course. Minutes, seconds. Counter time. Counter Oh, capital C on the counter time. That's what happened. All right, so this needs to be capital. And now the error's gone away. Unfortunately, that wasn't very clear, was it? That's one of my biggest problems with this. I don't find it that intuitive. All right. Other IDEs, it's the IDE issue. It's because of the errors, the logic of it is too far ahead, I think. And it's generally, like in the beginning, that's why I like comment everything out and then I start putting stuff back, because the errors move around on which line you're on. Like, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay. But the other line on the bottom is not okay. But anyway, long story short, it's because I didn't capitalize it, and it was really this was the offending line, and the rest of it was showing the error. So anyway, long story short, you saw it live, so you don't understand what I'm talking about. That's hard to explain to somebody. All right, so I think we might actually be done with this app. Let's just take a quick look here. Run it, test it out. We don't have anything at the end here, so we're good. Let's go ahead and run it. And hopefully I have all my components and everything in order. Oh, there we go. So start. 01, 02. This is going slower than this is, by the way. Stop. 0.05. Now I'm going to have a problem, I think, if I start it up. No, actually, because I created a new instance, it should start up again. Yep, 6, 7, 8. Because the value of count didn't stop. If I wanted to reset this, I could have a reset button and just change count. Watch this. We'll put a reset button here. Let's see if this works. This is going to be kind of, we have to make sure we get the logic correct. But here's my main storyboard. Well, I guess we could, clean it up a little bit by taking this out. There we go. And then add another button here. I will put the button in the middle. I'll put the button over here. Reset. Reset's going to make counter equal to 0. Except for I put a label instead of a button. So let's go put a button there. Just realized that. Because I looked at it, and you know how I realized it was black instead of blue? That's a button. Now we got 3 blue things going on here instead. So reset's going to take my counter, make it equal to 0. Should it do anything else? It doesn't really have to do anything else. So let's show you, see how this is working. And we'll see if it has to do anything else. Let's just take a look here. So I'm going to wire this guy, and I'll take the button down. I always like to use the touch down, but I don't necessarily have to use touch down. I can use anything else. I gotta call this reset button, and this is really a UI button. And it's really counter value that we're concerned with. So my method's just going to do 1 line of code, actually. The reset button is right here. It's going to do this. It's going to go counter equals 0. Whoops, what happened here? Count equals 0. Thank you. And let's see what happens now when we hit the reset button. Is the other stuff still gonna work? No, because we didn't invalidate anything. It's just gonna change. It's just gonna mess up our counter, really. So if we start it, we got 1, 2, 3. Let's see. Let's put it up to 5. Reset. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go make it go up to 6 this time. 6. Reset. 1. Because we're just changing the counter. We're just playing around with the counter. So it comes in handy if you keep a counter. The counter is universal. It works with everything on here. It's working with here. If we stop it, we started, we're going to be okay, because we stop it, we invalidated it, we made it nil, we garbage collected it, we took it away. But the start's making a brand new instance of the object all over again. So we actually have a really good balance with that. If you run into a situation where you start it, and then you stop it, you don't make it nil, don't invalidate it, you just stop it, then the more times you do that, the more instances of those NS timers you're creating, the more objects you're creating, and the more objects you're creating, the more memory you're eating up, and you're never going to garbage collect that memory. And eventually your app's gonna die. Actually, the whole phone will probably die on you because you're gonna eat up all the memory if it runs like for another couple weeks or something like that. It's gonna take a while for it to eat up the memory, but there's some apps out there that are pretty bad that way. And if you try and you stick it, if you get a real developer account, you go through the same process that you did to set up the developer account, which I showed you before I started this tutorial. Set up your own account the same identical way. You upload your app into it using the same menu. In fact, it's almost the same process. You just have to go through a bunch of procedures. You have to sign it and do a bunch of stuff to it. Get it in there, and then it's going to come back, and Apple's going to say, "Hey, your program's got a memory leak," and then you got to go fix it. Because if you don't clean up your memory, you create an app that's going to hose somebody's device. They're not going to want it in their store. So that's one of the things you're going to be familiar with. Is first of all, the no-brainer is not using pirated, copyrighted material. The other no-brainer is obviously multimedia, songs and stuff like that. Unless you wrote it yourself, you're not doing it. The other thing is it's going to eat up memory. There's also checks to see, is it child-proof or child-safe? There's foul language in there. And what is the activity actually doing? What is the app doing? Like, is it going to fill up the person's SD card or something like that? Is it going to is it malicious in nature? Is it stopping other apps? Is it bypassing? And then they have a few issues sometimes when you're using some of the content provider stuff and you're messing it up. Is it damaging your contacts list or something like that? So there's a few checks for malicious stuff too. So by the time you actually download the app from the App Store, if you're going to try somebody's, it's pretty safe. Part. I have to say I like that better than Android. The Android market, you stick anything you want in there. You can make a whole virus app if you want, stick it up in the Android market. No one's going to care. The whole thing can just crash your phone. Which, kind of pros and cons. You don't have to go through, you still have to go through some hoops and barrels to get your app into the Google market, or they don't call it that anymore, Google Play now. But not quite as strict. So, not quite as bad. So, but still, you do actually have to pay like $49, I think. So Apple's $99, Google's like $49 or $29 or something. It's definitely half the price. Apple's gonna take you longer to get it in. Google's a little bit easier. And you compare the two platforms. You can do more on the Android end of it than you can on the iOS part of it. So because you have more freedom. You can actually put pirated stuff in your Google apps. You can't put that in your iOS apps. So, pros and cons. Depends on what you're looking for. Have we exhausted this one? We have an alarm clock, so I think we're done with this tutorial. So I'm going to stop this video. I think it's time for a break, or no?